Hi, I'm Captain Steve Chaconis, and one of the best ways to fish in the summertime is punching mats. These are grass mats that are so thick that most people can't get any kind of lure through them, but with a heavy weight, and you have to use tungsten. Tungsten is a key when you're fishing grass mats because tungsten, for its weight, is smaller than lead and will penetrate much easier. You also have to use strong hooks. I like using the wide gap hook because it's easier on the plastics, but you can use a straight shank hook, what we call a flipping hook. This one has a nice keeper on it. This is a really good hook, and the gap is perfect, and you'll absolutely hook those fish every time. The other thing that's a must is braid. I like using 50-pound Gamma torque braid, and I love it on a bait casting reel. I use old school Abu Garcia, made in Sweden. It's because of the way the line comes on and off the spool. It makes it easier to pitch. I also use a long, heavy action, fast tip rod, 7 foot 8 inch rod. The bait is one that you may not be able to find anywhere. It's called a hard-nosed craw, and it was made by Manns. This section of the craw right here is harder than the rest of the plastic. That will give you a lot better, it'll keep the bait on a lot better for you. It also is compact, it's thin, it'll come through the grass and allow you to get some of those bites. We're going to talk about what to do and where to do it and how to do it. So coming up right now, mat fishing. There we go. So the most important thing about punching mats to me is when you have bluebird skies, calm water, it's hot, you've got mats with trash and gunk, and I like to use what I call the tennis ball pattern, although in this case it's not a tennis ball, it's a plastic bottle, which shows you that stuff will drift up into these mats. It could be dead fish, decaying, whatever. Crawfish are underneath them. The bass are underneath them because there's a cavern under there, because these thick mats block all the sunlight so nothing really grows underneath it. And the bass are just there in the cooler areas waiting for a crawfish or bait fish to do something stupid. So we're going to use a heavy weight. This is a 3/4 ounce tungsten weight. And I'm just going to pitch it to spots that look good. And to me, spots that look good have a little bit of that green vegetation. And what reason I'm looking for that is because that's like a stalk, and it ends up like a pillar to hold, it'll hold that mat in place, but it also has a little bottom to it so the fish will relate to it as cover underneath the water. It's also an easier way to penetrate because you're not going through real thick mat. The biggest problem most people have with fishing mats is that you get a lot of gunk on your bait. A lot of times you have to remove it by hand, but so just make pitches out there. That's about as far away as I'm going to pitch. I don't like to go too far into there because getting the fish out sometimes is tougher. Plus, I really can't see targets. The deeper areas are going to be out here towards the edge. And I don't really, what I'm doing now is sort of bouncing it on the bottom, but I really don't like to do that too much. I mean, if it works, I'll do it all the time, but it's just it's a habit. The best way to fish this is to punch and go. Just let it punch, let it go, get it out there, and let it drop, and watch it on the drop. Okay, so this bait has hit the bottom. It's only about 2 feet deep there, and I watch it. 1001, 1002, that bait doesn't move. That means the fish doesn't have it. I'll go ahead and lift up on it, make sure there's nothing there, shake it a little bit, bring it back in. What I really like to do, and this weight may be a little heavy for this, is I like to kind of let it sit there on the surface a little bit, shake it a little bit, and then let it punch through. That kind of attracts fish to the bait. I got a little bit snaggy there. Okay, that attracts fish to the bait. They see something going on the surface. They come over to take a look. I like a faster reel, but not one of those super fast. This is a 6.6 to 1, plenty fast. And I go old school. This is an old Ambassador reel. It's about all I ever use this reel for. is for punching mats, maybe throwing frogs, but basically punching mats. I like it because it's a super winchy type of reel. It's not too heavy for the size. It holds the braid really well. Also, the level wind on it, as you cast, it goes back and forth, and when you reel, it goes back and forth. So you don't get very many of those what I call braid lashes, where because you put slack in the line, the braid moves a little bit, and then it kind of wraps up on itself and gives you what I call a braid lash. And so this doesn't really do that often. The line stays in there pretty good. So again, let it drop. This is going to be a bang bang thing, and I'll get into the hook set once we start hooking a few, but the hook set is critical. It's critical that less is more. When the fish bites on it, you just stick the butt of the rod in your belly and you lean up with it. If you try to snap set, this big weight is going to pull and wedge that fish's mouth open, and you're going to lose a lot more fish that way. So you just pull. I'll talk about hooks a little bit later on, and go over the types of hooks that I like to use, and also the types of baits. Everything you want to think about is I want it slender so it drops through the cover pretty quick. I don't want something big, bulky plastic that gets hung up, or even a wide gap hook sometimes will do that. It'll get caught up. So your best hook is what we call flipping hooks, or they call them super hooks now. And it's basically, it's just a round bend hook with a straight shank, and some of them have better barbs and keepers on them than they used to. The eyes are welded. That's important too, because the eye of most hooks they're not welded. And so when you put the hook under pressure with the line will find its way through that eye of the hook, and you'll lose a lot of fish where it just comes unbuttoned because of that. So we could do a couple things. What I do if I want to use these wide gap hooks is I tie a monofilament knot between the braided knot. I don't know if it's going to show up to you, but there's a monofilament knot tied just above the gap and between the gap and the braided knot. That mono knot acts as a barrier to keep your braided line from getting into that gap, so you don't lose as many fish on that. I know a lot of people, I broke them off on a braid hook set. Well, what kind of hook did you have? And what kind of knot? I'll also tie a double Palomar knot. Double Palomar knot is much harder to get through that gap. It's a bigger knot. I like 50-pound Gamma torque braid. This is an old Fenric rod that actually Kelly Jordan recommended this one to me. It's 7'9", and it'll handle up to 2 ounces of weight. So it's a good beefy rod. It's long. You can really get some leverage and pull these fish out of the cover. And again, watching that line when it drops through there. If nothing. And the other thing to watch too, when you're skiing it across the top of the water, a lot of times the fish will be there. The other places to try this is if you're frog fishing and you're getting a lot of bites and you know the fish are underneath those mats. This is a way to go after them. A lot of guys won't do this because it's a tedious way of fishing. But if you do it enough, it becomes second nature and you don't really worry about anything too much. Now that one's still dropping a little bit. Must be a deeper hole there. I didn't see it. Usually you'll see it pop as it drops if it's going to run a good ways. But this looks like a pretty good spot. Just kind of lean up here. Power poles come into play too a lot when you're doing this, because you're fishing shallow and you don't want to move the boat around too much. It kind of spooks the fish. You also want to be able to cover an area. It's not like you're seeing one piece of wood. Here you got a pretty good sized mat that's been blown up into the corner of this lake, and if I didn't have my power poles, or if I wasn't able to stop, I wouldn't be able to methodically fish as much of this as I can. I try to break it down in a grid. Once I decide how deep I'm going into it, I'll start and just kind of every 2 or 3 feet put a bait down. If I find something going on, I'll go back and hit the area again. I A lot of people think that punching is where you're actually throwing it up in the air and letting it crash through the cover. You don't want to do that. I try to make a quiet entry, get it up there, and just let it sit on that mat if I can. But the longer I can let it sit there and shake it, and then let it drop through, it's a pretty good way to attract a good bite. So the other thing I'll do is once I get it, work it in that area, I'll pull it up, get it on the surface, and then drop it through in another spot. I'm looking for areas like this, those little pads over there. Drop it close to it, drop it in them. And those fish will, I mean, they'll grab it, they'll pull the rod down when you get a bite. The other thing about these older reels, they have basically two settings for the drag, on or off. And when it's on, ain't nothing gonna pull that line out. And I want a pretty good hook set with these things, and I want to be able to pull that fish out of the cover without drag pulling out, because then they have a chance of working that hook free. So we're coming up to an area here that has a lot of good looking areas. You can sort of see there's a lot of water underneath these underneath this mat. It's just all gooey, slimy. It's got some of those little pads in there, so it kind of holds it together. A little bit of grass and some open areas. I don't like to fish the open areas. I like to be under the thick mat. I try the outer edges first. If I don't get any bites, I will go in and fish that water that's real skinny. But this is only about 3 feet deep here on the edge. There could be fish right up against the bank. Again, I'm watching that line. If I see it start to go, and each area that you're at, you got to kind of get a mental clock. You know, how deep is it there? How long does it take this bait to get to the bottom? And if it just goes and goes and goes and goes and goes and goes and goes, you better set the hook, because that's a fish. And the longer these mats are here, the less it doesn't take long, maybe a week or two, and you'll get rid of all of the grass and vegetation that's below it. So these fish, they're down there. There might be some little bit of old vegetation laying down there on the bottom, but you know, for the most part, the fish just laying there waiting for something to make a mistake over their heads, and they're feeding up. So that's again why it doesn't really make sense a lot of times to twitch this thing up and down in the water column. You just want to, you know, get it there. I try again to land it as soft as I can, so when it does crash, it free falls. It doesn't just splat and go. It just sort of sits for a split second, then free falls. So they'll turn around and find it. And it is a full contact sport when you get into these type of areas. You might feel a thump or a tap too, but for the most part, they'll just pull. And you know, it's funny, it's a more forgiving bite than a Texas rig, I think, because these fish are really keying in on grabbing that, and they're there to eat. And when they bite something, it's because they're eating it. It's not because it's invading their territory or something like that. They're just really eating it. So they will pull down and hold on to that a little bit longer, so you don't have to freak out if you feel something or see something and miss it. Just wind down and feel the fish, just set the hook. I get asked about the color, the weight too a lot. This is a silver one. I don't mind them. Some guys will paint them black with a Sharpie or something like that. I just think it's a bang bang bite, so it doesn't really matter what color it is. They're not going to key out as long as it's halfway. I think the flash helps. I like a natural colored bait, which means usually green pumpkin. You know, it's going to be subdued light. It's not going to be muddy water. It's not going to be crystal clear water. So it's just a matter of something that looks natural when it falls. Green pumpkin, red flake seems to be a good color. This is, I think, green pumpkin, black flake, which has a little red in it too. On the Potomac, I'm looking for stalks of milfoil. I think that's a big key on that river. That they grow to the surface. Anytime you have a tall grass, it'll act like a pillar, and it'll collect this water snot or whatever, algae or fungus or decaying stuff, it'll hold on to it. The other thing I do is I turn off my electronics. I mean, why? Why I'm on? I don't care where I am or what depth. Most of the time these mats are not going to be in really deep water, so I know it's going to be shallow. So, you know, sometimes on a big grass type of fishery like the Potomac, it's all the same level. I might be looking for isolated islands of matted grass away from like the thick mats, especially there. It's a tidal thing too. I like mat fishing at higher tides because there's water underneath there, and the fish will be, you know, in that grass pretty good. But when the tide drops, they tend to move out of it as those mats tend to compress over their heads. Grass mats don't necessarily have to be in a grass bed. You might find grass that's collected around a dock or around a tree. It serves the same purpose. It's a big canopy, and it's a shaded area, and it's a good ambush area for a lot of fish. I fish them a little bit differently when I'm fishing the ones around docks. I'll run baits, crankbaits and other baits along the side of it before I actually start punching it, and then I'll punch it. See, it's only about a foot deep right there, but as my buddy Bill Chapman, he was from West Virginia, and he used to say, Steve, the fish we're trying to catch aren't all that tall, so a foot of water's plenty. And it is a finessey thing to kind of get this bait. Once you get it up to the, like I'm on the underside of that grass, now I'm just going to shake it and see if I can pull it up over and then drop it through again. It's not a yank, it's just kind of a finesse sort of snap with the rod, trying to get it up. So it's up at the surface now. I'm just going to shake it, see if I can get it to break through all that slop. I don't want it to come flying back all at once. This one's not going to let go. There it goes finally. But you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Starting to see trails in the grass where I've already fished. And I kind of like try to keep working a grid. I might, you know, when the water's clear like this, I might go about 3 feet apart. If it's muddier or stained, I will go 2 feet apart. But there's an alley right here that I missed, and I'll go right in between them. See if I can find one that didn't want to move 3 feet. I call it the tennis ball pattern because I used to see tennis balls. I remember one of the first times I saw a tennis ball out on the river I was guiding, young kid, and I said to him, I thought it'd be funny, you know, try to be funny with the kid. They out funny you sometimes. I said, oh yeah, I said, see that tennis ball? I guess the dog wasn't able to find that one. And the little kid goes, or maybe he was just tired of chasing tennis balls. Could be, right? But a tennis ball floating around, bottle, sticks, wood, decaying stuff, it's all food source at that point. And the tennis balls just shows you that stuff is drifting in there. And the same thing with the bottles, driftwood, anything that's floating. The other thing about these mats is you can get closer to the fish with them a lot of times, especially in clear water. Fish don't freak out as much when they don't see you as well. If you can't get that little subtle snap to get that bait to come out of that grass, I usually just grab the butt of the rod, and it helps. I push with one hand and pull with the other. Helps get you that snap that you're looking for to get that bait out of there. Okay, went to a lighter weight. Now this is the same spot we were fishing before, and that bait just sort of goes through it, but doesn't really splash through it like the other one did. So it's going to have a little bit slower fall, and it'll lay on top of that grass like it's doing now until I can find a way to make it drop through. And that's what I want. I want to shake it on the top of that mat just enough to where the fish could come and sort of check it out. This thing is just a little too light. It's not going through as easy as I want it to, but let me see. We'll try it a little bit and not give up on it yet. If the grass had like a 4 foot deep cavern underneath it, I wouldn't mind that heavier weight, but we're talking about maybe 2 feet here. So it gets through before the fish really have a chance to react to it. That's why I'm trying to slow this down a little bit. Yeah, I'm going with heavier weight. All right, a little heavier weight. Kind of like something a little bit lighter than this, but the other one was definitely too light, so it's kind of like Goldilocks. This will have to do because the other one just wasn't going through good enough. This one's going through a little too good. But if I could kind of just lay it out there and let it just sort of land quietly and then slowly drop from there. Well, it's definitely going through better. But it might be going a little too much better. But it's better to be this way than it was too light, because if it's not going through, you know, this is just not going to get down to where the fish are. It's going to penetrate that mat and get those fish to bite. Come on, fishy, fishy, fishy. We got a tree, we got a mat. Let's see, is there a fish? There we go. And we got him out of there, didn't we? Yep. Not a bad fishy. You know, they, again, that one went down and just kept going. And just a slight pull on the hook set. You see, getting him out of that grass, he's still kind of lively. We like that. That's a mat fish. We'll let you go, fishy. You know, you could do this in the fall with leaves too, but the summertime, everything's more alive, and these mats are pretty much stationary. If they're here today, they're going to be here tomorrow. With leaves, they could get blown around, but for that specific moment in time, leaves are pretty good to fish because it creates a canopy, if you will, and you know, again, some more cover, ambush area. A little different than this. This is more habitat than cover, and there's their whole environment is under there. Well, what do you know? A tennis ball right there. My tennis ball pattern might be working. Let's see what happens. This looks like a really good spot. I keep saying that, don't I? Otherwise, why would I cast there? Why would I cast to a spot? Go, this looks like a lousy spot. I think I'll cast there. No, don't cast unless you think it's a good spot. There we go. I said it looked like a good spot. Yeah, it looks like a good spot. A decent one. Feeling like a little tap, a little bit of a pull, and then you just pull back. We'll get that green stuff off of a nice chunky fish. Let's see. See, the reason I thought that was a good spot is you could see it's kind of like a point, but the thicker grass out in front of it shows that it's a little bit deeper over there. And you know, if they get the same mat up and down, you look for something irregular, and that's what you're going to throw to. So there I saw like this area here is a little bit deeper, and I figured there'd be a fish in that deeper stuff. And hey, why else would you cast there, right? Why are you going to cast there unless it's a good spot? And you can see where I cast. It was right up there where that hole is. There's another one. Yeah. The line hit the water, started to go down, kept going. Here we go. Oh, this is such a cool way to fish, but you got to really want to do it and learn it. I've had people out, oh, I want to learn how to punch mats. After about 15 minutes, they go, give me a Senko. Give me a Senko. But if you're serious about it, when you see matted up grass like that, you know that there's going to be fish in it. And you can find them with your frog. I mean, find them with your frog, know they're there. But this way, you know, with a frog, you leave a lot behind. you know they're in the area, but you can still leave a lot behind because you're covering it a little bit faster. With this, you can start picking apart little targets. What I saw there was where the pads started to come out from the shoreline, and there was grass out in front of it, so I said there's got to be a fish over there somewhere. But these hard-nosed craws, if you can find any, they were made by Mans, and they're a really good punching bait. I think there was a bait before, kind of before I got into this. I think they used it in Florida. It was called a BB cricket, and guys say it kind of looked like this, a little bit shorter too. I kind of like it being long. I mean, some guys don't like it long, but they want it to be about the size of the hook, so when the fish grabs it, they get all hook. I don't know there's that much difference. I mean, this thing goes past the hook a good bit, about, I don't know, about an inch or so, but a lot of guys like to have them about maybe an inch shorter than this. But you can shorten these baits up, but that's where the hard nose part is, and that's why I kind of like it. What the hard nose is that the nose of the bait is made out of a different plastic, and it's harder. There's another one. Oh, boy, he hit it as soon as it hit the water. That's one where I probably should have waited a little bit. Like I said, you usually have a little more time with these things than you think you do. They're not being spooked by anything. You see how close we are to them, and this is crystal clear water. We'll see if we put it in the same spot this time. But he whacked it as soon as it hit the water. There he is. Yep, got him. He came back and got it. So that's, you know, the other thing is I watched where this bait went, and when it landed and made a little bit of a hole, I just threw back to that hole to get the fish that bit the first time. Okay, fishy, come on, let go of that hook. There we go. He's not a giant, but gosh, that's a 12-inch fish. We'll take him. But as aggressive as that guy was on the first pitch, I kind of figured another pitch would get him. The other thing that I found with people that are trying to learn this, it takes a while to learn what is grass and what is a fish. And I don't know whether I came up with this or someone else. It might have been Woo Dave's, because most everything I know about plastics fishing was from Bassmaster Classic champion Woo Dave's a long time ago, from back in the 80s. It feels like a rubber band. You go to lift up on it, like there, it doesn't feel like a rubber band, it feels like it's stopped. So that's not a fish, but a lot of people think that's a fish. And when you think that, when you finally do get a bite, you're not going to set a hook, or you're not going to react appropriately. So learn what isn't a bite first. You get a lot more of those. You'll get a lot more, oh, that's grass, that's rock, that's stick. What the heck is that? That's a fish. Set the hook. Whatever that hook set is for the technique that you're using, go ahead and set it. This is a great way to fish, especially lakes where it's not a dominant pattern, where it's kind of like a secondary pattern, and a lot of people will avoid it. And so the fish aren't used to seeing stuff do this. They've seen frogs and stuff like that, but you know, I'd never see people punching out here. I mean, it may not be the best way, but when, you know, the water's still in the 80s, it's a hot day. It's almost 95 degrees today, and it's a hot day, so the fish are going to be looking for places like this. There we go. Little rumble, pull, and there you go. Hi there, hi everybody. I'm a punching mat fish. You can catch me by punching mats. Well, I tell you, if you don't believe me, listen to the fish. Listen to the fish. This is a fun way to fish, especially if you've never done it before. If you'll stick with it, it's the only way you're going to learn this. Like I said, to find them first, throw a frog, see what the frog does. If you get them to bite the frog, then you know they're in there. And once you know they're in there, you can just start to learn by doing it. The first time that I punched mats, I basically went out and just put the trolling motor down and threw at every piece of grass I could, every floating grass. And then I started to listen to what the fish were telling me. You ain't getting a bite. And then I started, listening to guys like Kelly Jordan and Greg Hackney and Ish Monroe. My gosh, Ish has helped me a lot with this too. And, you listen to what these guys say and you watch them. I mean, they've had, especially, Kelly's great, but Hackney, that's what they do down where he's from. That's what they do on the Delta where Ish is from. So there are fish to be caught doing that. And like I said, you go to a lake where it's not a dominant pattern. Like this lake, there's just a little bit of grass matted up like this. There's a lot of grass, but there's just very little that's matted up like this. And, there are a lot of other options for guys. They don't have to fish this thick stuff and go through this. And there's no other way. These fish don't even see lures. The grass is too thick here. You can't fish it from the bank. And if you're in a boat, you got to really want to fish it. And there's no other reason for anybody to be over here. So these fish are just sitting here going like, I'm having a good old time all by myself. But when you have a small area, break it down real small. You go into a cove and it's got acres and acres of grass, and then all of a sudden you see like a couple spots the size of your boat that are just grass mats about 30 feet away from the main grass bed. That's the spot you want to be in. But here, we're just looking at, basically, are they shallow or deep? That's the only two types of grass mats that we have in here. We tried shallow. We picked up a few doing that. But when we started going deeper, started paying off a little bit more. And the other thing was tweaking the weight. I started off bigger size I like to use. I think it's 3/4 of an ounce. But I go by size and I'll put it on, see if it's what I want. If it's not, then I just go with a smaller one or a bigger one till I get it the way I want it. And what I wanted was something that would go through the grass. Had to go through the grass. But I wanted it to barely go through the grass. I didn't want it to go every time, as soon as it touched the grass, go through. I wanted a little bit of persuasion. I wanted it to have to shake every once in a while. Not all the time, but every once in a while. I wanted it to shake. I'm also making my presentation, so I basically stop the bait as soon as it hits the water. I don't want it to make a big commotion. I want it to kind of enter halfway quietly on that initial cast. See, that time it didn't go through when it landed, which is fine, because that gives me the opportunity to shake it, and the fish that are anywhere close by will come over to take a look. And as long as I get it to sink around those fish, then there's a good chance I'll increase my bites. So if you've ever wondered, are there any fish under these slimy mats? The answer is yes. Oh, absolutely yes. Can you catch them? The answer is yes, but you got to really... This is, I'm guessing, is the most difficult way to fish. I've always tried to think, is there anything that's more difficult? And the answer is probably no, because not only is the casting kind of tricky, because you've got to use a bait caster. I don't see you doing this with a spinning rod for a couple reasons. One, there aren't too many spinning rods that are going to be able to handle an ounce and a half weight, and be able to handle horsing a fish out of really thick cover. And it's hard, it can be done, to make this bait enter the water very quietly without making a huge splash. So, plus you want to use heavier braid, which not so bad. You get a bigger spinning reel, you can kind of do that. But much better with a bait caster. Again, I'm using a 7'8" rod. You don't have to. I mean, I've done it with 7, but 7'8" is a lot of leverage, and the bait caster reels they're like winches. You can winch these fish in. Spinning reels just don't, let's face it, spinning reels are for finesse fishing. Can you use it for other stuff? Oh, absolutely. But it's like, can you use pliers to get a nut off of a bolt? Yeah, you could do that. But a socket works much better. And that's kind of what we're saying with this. You can use the spinning gear, but a bait caster works much, much better. It's got all the advantages of, and the rods are built for it. The companies build rods for this technique. Now, if there's one in this stuff that's only a few feet off, it's going to be right up against those cattails. There we go. Right where I said he'd be. Right up against those cattails. All right. I like it when they read the same book that I do. I mean, this is why you do it. I mean, you get out here. I also look in their gullet. I don't see that he's been eating anything. But you get out here and you grind it out and you fish for fish that nobody else fishes for, and and you have a good time doing it. But hopefully you're picking up on some of these little tidbits. I mean, like I said, this is not a lake that I would say is a good mat fishing lake, but it's got mats, and you can catch fish in these mats, but you just got to know where to go. You see all this stuff? I didn't fish out here on the edge. I put my bait right up against those cattails. Let's see here. Got to re-rig this little puppy. What a day on the water. Mat fishing is not that hard, but it is difficult because you have to do it and practice it and have confidence in it. Hopefully today we've shown you how to catch a few fish and some of the pointers, especially if you're fishing a lake that's not known for mat fishing. Try it, because you're going to find fish that nobody else is able to catch or is fishing for. Thanks for watching. Tell your friends about us. Please hit that subscribe button. My name's Captain Steve Chaconis.